A rumbling engine stops dead in an Ontario assembly line. Why did a General Motors plant in Oshawa suddenly hear the clang of an imposed duty? The air tasted of cold steel, and the workers felt the weight of a tariff that could crush a nation's auto dreams. What happens when the wrench of policy hits the gears of industry? Last week the news echoed with the same metallic clang, this time in the boardrooms of Ottawa. Canada has begun signing a $214 billion series of deals, luring partners that once leaned on Washington. 34% of Canadian exports once flowed southward, now they drift toward new horizons. The old trade rhythm is broken, and the next note could be a strike that rattles farms and factories alike. Which sector will feel the first tremor? The once steady friendship between the two neighbors cracked when tariffs leapt from 25 to 50%. Steel and aluminum prices roared like a furnace, while automobile parts hissed under the heat of near-double duties. Prime Minister Mark Carney declared the era over on a cold Washington morning, and the promise of a tax on Canadian energy sent a shiver through the oil fields. The warning was clear, but what will the next threat look like? In response, Canada turned its compass eastward, sealing a sweeping partnership with Indonesia, 280 million people, 90% of tariffs gone. A $2.3 billion package cemented the Indo-Pacific push, while Europe, Japan, Australia, and India opened their doors. As the trade winds shifted, the United States watched factories buckle under rising steel costs. And farmers felt the sting of new market barriers. Will the U.S. abandon its protectionist stance or double down on the wall? Now factories across the Midwest hear the hiss of gasoline and the sigh of grain silos, each fearing a price surge that could shatter consumer wallets. Mill workers question their next paycheck, while corn growers scan foreign markets for a lifeline. The question lingers in every boardroom and backyard alike: who will foot the bill for these trade walls? The answer hangs in the balance, waiting for the next diplomatic rumble to tip the scales. Imagine a trade partnership that had seemed as solid as a steel bridge, only to be ripped apart by a single, fiery proclamation on the steps of a foreign capital. Could a few bold words really send ripples through factories, farms, and shipping lanes, turning confidence into dread across an entire continent? The world watched as the old alliance cracked, and no one could foresee the chaos that would follow. Earlier we reported how Prime Minister Mark Carney's blunt statements in Washington changed tone. A quiet disagreement became a public declaration, shattering a historic bond. Dissatisfaction once whispered behind doors erupted for the whole world to witness. What if a line of small workshop doors and massive factory gates suddenly trembled, as the whisper of a 50% tariff becomes a deafening roar that threatens to double the price of every steel beam? How far will businesses crawl before the ceiling of cost collapses, and what hidden threat looms when the very energy that powers a nation is painted as a target? The answer ignited a frantic dash toward distant markets, reshaping the map of global trade. From tiny workshops to sprawling plants, anxiety spread like a cold draft. A 50% levy feels like a hammer striking heavy steel. Canadian steel firms warned U.S. buyers that prices would double, no bluff. The final spark arrived when whispers of a tax on Canadian energy rose. Canada fuels the United States with oil and gas, a lifeline. Nobody imagined those supplies could become a battlefield of threats. Yet the threat buzzed in boardrooms, making executives wonder about surprises. Instead of retreating, Canada surged into new territories across the globe. By late 2024, massive deals unfolded in Asia and Latin America. The comprehensive partnership with Indonesia, home to 280 million people, opened doors. It covers gadgets to mining, slashing 90% of tariffs. That pact bound Canada tightly to the booming Asian market. Simultaneously, Ottawa doubled its Indo-Pacific push with a $2.3 billion plan. The investment signals a deliberate, systematic foothold, not an accidental one. Across the border, farmers, manufacturers, and shoppers felt a sudden thunderclap. Leaders from Michigan to Missouri flooded the White House with urgent letters. Auto giants fear car prices climbing thousands, choking consumer appetite. Steel tariffs sent distributor costs spiraling, casting doubt on mill workers. Growers eye fresh markets, fearing retaliatory strikes on their harvests. What will the next wave of retaliation look like, and which sector will shudder first? In the midst of a turbulent trade environment, one pressing question echoed through boardrooms and farms alike: who would bear the cost of escalating trade barriers? The answer emerged painfully clear: American businesses and consumers would shoulder the burden. Meanwhile, Canada seized the opportunity to position itself as a sanctuary amidst the chaos. While the United States implemented unpredictable policies, Canada boldly asserted, "We create predictability." This wasn't mere marketing rhetoric, it was a calculated political and economic strategy. Canada's leaders swiftly maneuvered, forging new partnerships with major global players like the European Union, Japan, Australia, and India. Investors took notice, realizing the advantages of establishing operations in Canada over navigating the uncertainty of the American market. This shift resulted in a 9% increase in foreign direct investment entering Canada. In stark contrast, the U.S. experienced a 28% decline during the same timeframe. Billions began flowing into Canada's initiatives for battery production and critical mineral exploration, signaling robust growth. Conversely, the agricultural sector in the United States faced severe pressures. Citrus farmers in Florida and bourbon makers in Kentucky felt the sting of retaliatory tariffs and struggled to access Canadian markets. As tax burdens surged across critical industries, business leaders grew increasingly bewildered, questioning Washington's aggressive stance. Behind closed doors, advisors made dark jokes about Canada becoming the U.S.'s 51st state, a quip more sobering than amusing. Yet, one thing became unequivocally clear: while America erected walls, Canada built bridges. In the background, a staggering $214 billion trade agreement loomed large, binding Canada to new allies in Asia and Latin America, fundamentally reshaping its economic landscape and weakening long-standing U.S. relationships. The plot thickens as the repercussions of America's protectionist measures unfold, leaving everyone asking, how will these changes ripple through global markets and domestic landscapes? What awaits both nations as they navigate this new reality? What if the walls a nation builds end up pulling it apart? Canada's economy, once almost glued to its southern neighbor, is reshaping itself faster than anyone expected. Analysts warn that U.S. protection moves may boost a few domestic firms today, yet the price of losing key partners grows heavier tomorrow. Global corporations that have woven supply chains, joint R&D labs, and capital streams over the last decade dread sudden barriers. Stability and predictability have become their lifeline, and Canada is betting on exactly that. When the former president rose early and doubled steel tariffs from 25% to 50%, then slapped a 25% duty on automobiles, companies' strategic maps scrambled. It isn't surprising that Canada is quietly turning its back, seeking reliable markets elsewhere. The United States, many claim, is self-destructive. Which sector will crack first under this relentless pressure? Imagine the clatter of steel presses, then a deafening silence as tariffs roar. Canada now brands itself as a safe, rule-based hub stretching from Europe to Asia, promising bridges where walls rise. A massive $214 billion trade pact with Asian and Latin American partners is reshaping the global map, eroding the United States' historic alliances. The World Bank's 2024 report shows Canada deepening its integration into worldwide networks, while U.S. export growth languishes at a bare 1%, versus Canada's steady 2.6% rise. Farmers, automakers, and small businesses all feel the sting of higher costs, prompting some to look beyond U.S. borders, even toward Mexico, though similar tax frictions linger there. At a time when U.S. protectionism spikes, Canada's open-door message attracts European producers, sparking agreements on critical minerals, green energy, artificial intelligence, and advanced manufacturing. Early signs reveal Canadian exporters surging into Asia and Europe while carefully guarding a slice of the U.S. market. And just when the United States believes it has forced the final blow, a hidden alliance flips the balance, leaving the world stunned, and the fate of the trade war hanging in the air. Earlier we revealed that Canada's colossal $214 billion pact is rewriting the trade map, shaking the United States' long-standing alliances. What if the fiercest tariff battles turn into a market nightmare for America? Experts now label the U.S. strategy the decade's biggest policy flop. The looming question: who will foot the bill for these walls? The president's relentless tariff raid has hammered the auto and energy sectors. The North American Automotive Makers Association warns that car prices are climbing, crushing shoppers and factories alike. Imagine the metallic clang of factory doors closing, the acrid smell of overheating engines, and families staring at higher billboards for gasoline. Small firms whisper louder than the giants. They grumble about soaring costs, the sting of every invoice. Some scout markets beyond the border, eyeing factories in Mexico, while others consider abandoning Canadian supply lines altogether. Yet Mexico faces its own tax storms, a hidden tremor beneath the surface. Meanwhile, the United States tightens its grip, trying to choke imports with higher duties. Canada, however, spreads its wings with softer policies, capturing a larger slice of global trade. Its economy swelled by 2.6%, while U.S. export growth crawls at a sluggish 1%. Picture a widening canyon, stretching from farm fields to high-tech labs, from wheat sacks to pharmaceutical vials. Canada's open-handed invitation to European producers echoes across continents. New pacts cover critical minerals, green power, artificial intelligence, and advanced factories. The once U.S.-dependent Canadian market now dances to its own rhythm, accelerated by Washington's hard stance. Will Canada emerge as the victor, the United States as the loser, or will both eventually find a new balance? The answer lingers, like the faint scent of diesel after a rainstorm, waiting for the next turn of the trade tide. In a world where nations forge their destinies through trade, a monumental tale unfolds. Canada, refusing to be boxed in by American tariffs and isolationist policies, boldly signed a staggering $214 billion multi-sector trade agreement with new partners across Asia and Latin America. This move is sending shockwaves through the traditional U.S.-Canada trade relationship. Could Canada leverage this moment to reshape its economic future? Experts are now branding this shift as one of the most significant policy failures of our time. The irony? While the United States imposes harsh tariffs, penalizing foreign producers and pushing domestic buyers to seek alternatives, it's American households that will ultimately bear the weight of such decisions. The automotive and energy sectors, once thriving, are now grappling with soaring vehicle prices and increasing operational costs. The North American Automotive Manufacturers Association warns that the tariffs are not merely abstract figures, they have real-world implications for manufacturers and consumers alike. As grocery bills and gas prices rise, anxiety builds in the hearts of everyday Americans. Across boardrooms, from corporate giants to small businesses, complaints about skyrocketing costs echo like a storm warning. Many are now turning their gazes outward, seeking trade opportunities beyond the borders of the United States. But here's a twist, the issues of taxation and trade tensions are not exclusive to the US and Canada. Mexico finds itself in a similar struggle. While the US clings to protectionist measures, Canada cleverly courts foreign investments and expands its market share. With a 2.6% growth rate juxtaposed against a mere 1% from the US side, the distance between their economic trajectories continues to widen. This gap is not limited to a single sector. It stretches across agriculture, industrial goods, automotive parts, and pharmaceuticals. Canada is quietly transforming its historically US-dependent economy. As the country reassures European producers that its doors remain wide open, it has set in motion a series of economic partnerships focused on critical minerals, green energy, artificial intelligence, and advanced manufacturing. Amid this turning tide, one question lingers: is this a new chapter for Canada, a defeat for the US, or perhaps a complex renewal for both sides? The future remains uncertain, but one thing is clear: Canada's resilience is crafting a new narrative on the global stage, one where bridges are built instead of walls.